I work in advocacy. I work for the Blue-Green Alliance, which is a coalition of labor and environmental organizations. It was started by the Sierra Club and the Steelworkers, and I work in the Capitol here. I used to teach in the sociology department at UC Davis. I am an economic sociologist. I think a lot about our economic and political systems. My dissertation was on university-industry relationships in agricultural biotechnology. I was on the board of the Davis Food Co-op for 3 years. I participated in the Evangelical Lutheran Church of America's Ethics of Eating workshop here last January. And I'm a part of the Green Faith Action Team, or GFAT, and I encourage all of you to get involved. The launch of our Green Faith program, a 2-year certification program for houses of worship that want to get more engaged in being good stewards of the environment, launches this afternoon with a kickoff lunch. And this food and faith workshop was, linked to this broader conversation about our role as ecological stewards. So my goal, I was thinking about this, is to share some of my food and faith journey in the hope that it will contribute to our community dialogue on food and faith. I was thinking about other talks I've given. It's different from an academic talk on my research or a lecture that I might give to my students. This is probably, hold on to the bottom part. And my views and values will inevitably be reflected in what I share. And I recognize that there might not be uniformity of opinion, but I want to create a safe space. We collectively create a safe space where ideas and experiences can be shared. So my guiding question is, how am I, as a person of faith, do we really need this? I'd kind of rather just skip it maybe at this point.
This is annoying.
Yeah, just getting it away. So, how am I can project.
You need the mic.
I need it? Even all my years of...
Is there a mic stand so that she doesn't have to jiggle it around all the time? Just maybe a mic stand.
I'll use it if that's the audience request.
Okay,
It's not working.
Okay. So,
Sorry about that.
that's okay. I'll try and be really loud, and if you're having trouble hearing me, I think we're going to try a different mic in a little bit. So how am I, as a person of faith, called to participate in creating a more socially just and ecologically sustainable food system? So first, the question is, what is our food system? Our food system involves everything that's needed to feed a population. So it includes growing, harvesting, processing, packaging, transporting, marketing, and disposing of food. It includes the research that goes into producing our food. It includes the workers who are engaged in food production, distribution, and sales. The ecological systems, our watershed, our soil, our plants, our animals, the microbes that underlie our food system. And our food system is embedded in a broader social, economic, and political context. We live in a market economy that has some social welfare provisions, and there is definitely a certain concentration of wealth and power and ownership in our food system and our broader economy. So, thanks. Our food system is a human system. It's imperfect. It's a little high, isn't it?
Well, it's what happened. Can we switch your side?
Oh, you want me to come over there?
Great.
Better? Thank you. It's a human system. It's imperfect. There are inequities in our food system. I would argue that there's some cruelty in our food system. There's waste. It's often guided by economic rationality. And I think there's a lack of reverence for the ecological systems on which our food production depends, for the labor of the people who are engaged in producing our food, for the lives of the animals and even the beneficial insects that make our food system possible. There's also an alternative food movement, which is also imperfect. It reflects efforts to address things that many people find troubling in our current food system. It's multidimensional and complex. You can't just reduce it down to one thing. Some examples of dimensions of the alternative food movement, and these have varying degrees of overlap, include the cooperative food movement, the farm worker movement, the sustainable agriculture movement, the organic movement, the anti-GMO movement, the local food movement, the slow food movement, the animal rights movement, and the food justice movement. So it's definitely multidimensional and complex. There's some examples of the dominant mainstream food system that personally give me pause. A nice example, if you want to go to the extreme, is, an extreme example of economic rationality guiding action would be feeding slaughterhouse waste back to cows, which Michael Pollan talks about in The Omnivore's Dilemma. Rendered cows were abundantly available in slaughterhouses, and it's a protein source, and it's cheap, so why not feed it back to cows, except the problem was you got mad cow disease. But sometimes when you get that yuck factor, you say, is this really ethical? Is this really something we should be doing? I feel troubled by concentrated animal feeding operations where we, raise livestock in really close conditions. In a lot of disadvantaged communities, environmental justice communities often live next to those places where we've got waste-filled lagoons from those concentrated animal feeding operations. Non-unionized slaughterhouses, there used to be a lot more, most of our meat processing used to be represented by labor organizations in the 60s and 70s, much less so now. You've got a lot of people who are desperately poor, who are often working in slaughterhouses. You've got big things of meat going by at high speeds and sharp knives, pretty dangerous. The routine use of antibiotics in our livestock production. I'm a supporter of Congresswoman Louise Slaughter's Preservation of Antibiotics for Medical Treatment Act. She's introduced it 4 times since 2007. There's pretty staunch organized opposition to it. It's supported by the World Health Organization, the American Medical Association, the National Academy of Sciences. This is recognizing that 80% of the antibiotics sold in the U.S. are sold for agricultural use. One of the reasons it's used is because it compensates for the crowded and unsanitary conditions in these concentrated animal feeding operations. And obviously it contributes to antibiotics resistance. Some other things, a lot of industrial fishing methods like bottom trawling, where you just scrape down the bottom of the ocean floor and you have all this bycatch that you throw back that wasn't what you were intending to catch. A lack of trade protections. We have subsidized agricultural commodities in this country, which we often dump on developing markets. So if you've got corn or wheat or soy that's been produced with generous subsidies, public subsidies, and then you dump that on a market and you've got growers who can't compete with those cheap imports, you're going to devastate local production, which is a cause of poverty and hunger. Global shipping, we have pretty unregulated stuff. We've got, basmati rice grown in California being shipped to India and basmati rice being grown in India being shipped to the US. And you think about global warming and all the fuel that's being involved in doing that, and is it really logical? So there's an economic rationality that doesn't often reflect other types of rationality, like ecological rationality and desires to kind of protect local food production. I'm concerned about pesticide and herbicide resistance. Oftentimes when you use these things for a while, they get resistance, and then you've got to come up with something stronger. And of course, farm workers are often exposed to those toxics. We've got aquatic and marine dead zones, like in the Gulf of Mexico, from excessive nitrogen and phosphorus use to fertilize our farms. We give hormones to cows to increase their milk production. Personally, that makes me uncomfortable. I don't really want hormones in my cows like that. Colony collapse disorder. This is about the epidemic that's affecting bees, which has been linked to global warming. It's been linked to, it's the Varroamite industrialized agricultural practices where we ship bees around and feed them sugar water. The plastic waste involved in packaging our food, which a lot of it winds up in our oceans. Methane from landfills and feedlots. We don't compost a lot of our food waste. It winds up in landfills. The concentrated animal feeding operations, again, produce a lot of methane versus if you've got livestock walking around and grazing. And methane is a really potent greenhouse gas. It's 84 times more potent than carbon dioxide in the first 20 years after it's released. I wanted to make the point that hunger, that another big critique of our food system is that there's a lot of people who are hungry. And so if you'd like to explore this idea further, there's a great film out right now called Inequality for All, featuring Robert Reich, the former Secretary of Labor under Clinton, where he explores the phenomenon of the increasing concentration of wealth, the 1%. The World Economic Forum just had a report presented by Oxfam that showed that basically 85 people on the planet control half the world's wealth. So a lot of the challenges in our food system, the food system is embedded in a broader economic system. So, and
Right, it's like 0.001%, not.
yeah, yeah, 85 out of 7 billion, yeah. And yeah, but this is, the commonly understood that we're the 99% and, yeah.
I think it's two different statistics. One is how much of the wealth, whether it's 50% of the wealth versus 1%. The other is how many people, half of the people,